I built my wealth without their help. Now I hold all the power and control. My dad's hand was still on my shoulder when my Uncle Mark said, loud enough for everyone within 10 meters to hear, "So you'll cover it, yeah? You're the only one here who actually can." The backyard was packed. Plastic chairs, folding tables, fairy lights that sagged in the middle, the smell of charcoal and onion and spilled beer. And my family was doing that thing they do where they pretend it's a relaxed get-together while quietly staging a public trial. My mom had just finished introducing me to her friends like I was a new appliance. "This is my kid," she'd said, proud and bright, the same way she talks about a renovated kitchen. "The one in the city. The one who's doing really well." I'd barely had time to take a sip of my drink before Mark's voice cut through the noise and turned my whole body tight. He was holding a manila envelope, pinched between two fingers like it was something delicate. It had my name scrawled on the front in thick black marker. He smiled like we were sharing a private joke. "It's simple," he added, and he tapped the envelope against his palm. "Just sign as guarantor. Couple years, tops. Then we're square." I didn't move for a second. I could hear laughter from the other side of the yard, someone's phone playing music too loud, the scrape of a chair. The envelope looked heavier than it should have, like paper had weight when it carried expectations. My dad's hand pressed into my shoulder a fraction harder, part warning, part claim, like he could physically steer me into the answer they wanted. I felt the urge to smile, to laugh it off, to buy myself time. That old muscle memory kicked in before my brain did. Don't make it awkward. Don't ruin it. Don't be the difficult one. But then Mark lifted his eyebrows and said, "Come on. Your family." And something in my chest went cold and clean. I reached out, took the envelope, and my fingers shook just enough that the corner crinkled. I looked down at the paperwork inside. Loan terms, bank letterhead, my uncle's name, my cousin's name, and there it was, a neat little line waiting for me like a trap with a ribbon on it. Guarantor. Behind me, my mom called out, "Everything okay?" In that too cheerful voice, and I could feel eyes turning toward us like sunflowers. It was a Tuesday night 8 years ago when I stopped asking my family for help and started quietly building a life they couldn't reach into. I was 24, living in a shoebox unit above a bakery, listening to delivery trucks reverse at 4 a.m., and staring at my bank account with that sick, hollow feeling you get when you realize adulthood is just math you can't argue with. I've been working full-time, studying part-time, and still floating between fine and one emergency away from disaster. That night, my car died on the side of the road in the rain. I remember the way the water ran down my sleeves and into my shoes, the way the streetlight made everything look gray and smeared. I called my dad. He answered, sighed before I'd even finished speaking, and said, "Can't you call roadside? I'm Busse." I called my mom. She said, "Oh, honey, we don't have spare money right now." And then, like she couldn't help herself, added, "Maybe if you hadn't moved out, you wouldn't have these problems." I called my Uncle Mark as a last resort because he'd once said, drunkenly at Christmas, that he'd do anything for family. He laughed and said, "You're in the city. Aren't you meant to be the smart one?" Then he told me to get an Uber. I sat on the curb for 40 minutes waiting for a tow truck I couldn't really afford, and I watched the rain bead on my phone screen, and I made a decision so quiet it didn't even feel like a decision at the time. I was never going to ask them again. Not for money, not for rescue, not for permission. If I wanted a life where I wasn't scrambling, I was going to have to build it with my own hands and keep it out of reach of the people who saw need as weakness and success as something they deserved a cut of. I didn't tell anyone that decision. I just started changing my life in small, boring, relentless ways. I took a second job doing weekend shifts at a warehouse, the kind where your hands smell like cardboard and dust no matter how much you wash them. I stopped eating out. I sold my car and bought an uglier one that didn't break down every other month. I took free online courses at night because I couldn't afford the fancy ones. I applied for better roles until someone finally took a chance on me. Then I worked like I was trying to outrun my own fear. And while I did all that, my family kept treating me like I was playing at adulthood. They call my jobs little gigs. They asked if I'd met anyone yet, like that was the real milestone. They told people I was always busy with that half-annoyed tone, like my effort was a personal insult. When I got my first decent pay bump, my mom said, "Must be nice," and my dad said, "Don't get too big for your boots." Mark didn't even ask what I did. He just asked if I could help him write a resume because he wanted to move up. The first time I actually started making money, real money, enough that my stomach stopped dropping every time I opened my banking app, I didn't tell them. I didn't post about it. I didn't buy flashy things. I kept my old phone until the screen lifted at the corner. I kept my furniture mismatched. I kept my mouth shut because I'd learned something important. In my family, information is currency, and they will spend yours faster than you can earn it. It happened gradually, but it happened. A promotion, then another. A side project with a friend that turned into a small business. A bit of luck, yes, but mostly a string of unglamorous choices that kept compounding. I learned how to budget properly. I learned how to invest without treating it like gambling. I learned that peace is expensive if you keep handing pieces of it away. I bought my first property at 30. Not a mansion, not a fantasy, just a modest place that meant my rent wasn't at someone else's mercy anymore. And I sat on the floor of the empty living room eating takeaway noodles out of the container because I hadn't bought a table yet. And I cried so hard I gave myself a headache. Not because the place was beautiful, because it was mine, because no one could evict me on a whim, because I'd finally built something solid without any of the people who'd told me I was too much or too sensitive or too ambitious. And then, because the universe loves timing, my family found out. It was my mom who let it slip first. She overheard me on the phone with my mortgage broker when I visited one weekend, and she did that thing where she pretends she didn't hear, but then asks a question that proves she heard everything. "So," she said, stirring tea too loudly, "you're buying something?" I made the mistake of saying yes. I made the mistake of thinking it might be nice to share something good. Within a week, Mark knew. My cousins knew. My grandparents knew. People I hadn't spoken to in years started sending me "proud of you" messages like we were close. My dad started calling me more often, and not in a warm way, more like a supervisor checking stock. My mom told her friends I was very successful in that sugary bragging tone she uses when she wants other people to envy her. And then the asks started showing up, one after another, like seagulls the moment someone drops a chip. At first, they were framed as compliments. "You're so good with money. You've always been responsible. You don't have kids, so you're flexible." Then the compliments turned into expectations. "Can you lend your cousin a bit? Can you just put this on your card? Can you co-sign so the bank takes us seriously?" Every time I hesitated, they'd pull out the same lines. "Family helps family. Don't forget where you came from. Money changes people." The funniest part, if it didn't make me want to scream, was that they acted like my wealth had appeared out of thin air. Like it was a personality trait. Like it wasn't built on years of saying no to myself. Years of missed weekends, years of anxiety and spreadsheets, and swallowing pride. They didn't see the scaffolding. They just saw the finished structure and assumed they were entitled to rent space in it. Which brings me back to my parents' backyard, the fairy lights, the smell of charcoal, and my Uncle Mark holding a manila envelope like it was my job to make his life easier. Mark's kid, my cousin Josh, was standing a few steps behind him, pretending to check his phone, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Josh is the kind of person my family calls a good bloke, which mostly means he smiles and goes along with things. He'd gotten himself into debt. Nothing criminal, nothing dramatic, just a string of bad decisions and a few unlucky breaks. And now Mark was trying to fix it the way Mark always fixes things, by pushing the cost onto someone else and calling it love. My dad leaned in toward my ear. "Just sign it," he murmured, like he was giving me advice about parking. "It'll help the family." I stared at the guarantor line and felt the old, familiar pressure build behind my ribs. The whole point of ambushing me here, at a barbecue, was that I couldn't say no without looking like the villain. They'd wrapped the ask in celebration. They made it public on purpose. If I refused, it wouldn't be "she has boundaries." It would be "she thinks she's better than us." I could already hear the story they'd tell. Mark shifted his weight, impatient. "Look," he said, dropping his voice like he was being generous. "We're not asking you to pay it. Just back it. You got assets now. The bank loves that. It's nothing to you. Nothing to you. That line always made my skin itch. Because it's never nothing. It's never nothing when your name is on a risk. It's never nothing when you've spent years clawing your way into stability. It's never nothing when the people asking have a history of treating your boundaries like a joke. I looked up and finally met Mark's eyes. Why are you asking me? I said. He blinked, like he wasn't expecting a question. Because you can, he said, like that was enough. No, I said, and my voice came out calmer than I felt. Why me? Mark's smile wobbled. Because you're family. And where was that? I asked, when my car broke down and I called you in the rain. A few heads turned. Someone nearby stopped laughing mid-sentence. My mom's face tightened at the edges, like she could sense the direction this was going. Mark scoffed. Don't be dramatic. I'm not, I said. I'm asking. My dad's hand came back to my shoulder, warning pressure. Not now, he muttered through his teeth. But it was now. They'd made it now the moment they shoved paperwork into my hands in front of everyone. Mark's eyes narrowed. That was years ago. This is different. Ow, I asked. Because this time you want something bigger? Josh shifted uncomfortably and finally looked up. His cheeks were red, and for a second I felt for him, because he was caught in the middle of a family pattern he didn't create. Then I remembered, being caught in the middle doesn't make it my responsibility to set myself on fire. My mom appeared beside us like she'd been summoned by tension. Sweetheart, she said brightly, voice too loud, why don't you two talk inside? Don't do paperwork out here. It's a party. Mark laughed. Yeah, come on. We'll handle it quietly. Quietly. Like they tried to handle my no quietly in the past by wearing me down until I caved. I closed the folder. The sound of it snapping shut felt final. I'm not signing, I said. Mark's face changed instantly. Anger flashing, then the wounded mask. What? He said, loud again, so everyone could hear. You're seriously going to say no? I am, I said. Dad's voice sharpened. Don't do this. Mum's smile trembled. Please, not here. Mark lifted his hands theatrically. Wow. Okay. So all that success really did go to your head. I felt my throat tighten. The old part of me wanted to defend myself, to list reasons, to prove I wasn't selfish. But I'd learned something over the years. The more you explain, the more they treat it like a negotiation. So I didn't explain. I'm not risking my financial future for this, I said simply. Mark's eyes flicked around, searching for support. You wouldn't even notice it, he snapped. You've got property. You've got money. Meanwhile, Josh is drowning. Josh's face flinched at the word drowning. My mom made a small distress sound. Then you help him, I said. You're his dad. Mark's nostrils flared. I'm helping him. That's what this is. No, I said, and I could hear the steadiness in my own voice like it belonged to someone else. This is you trying to make me responsible for it. People were watching now. I could feel it, the shift, the slight hush. Someone somewhere turned the music down a notch without anyone asking. Mum's eyes were glossy. Dad's jaw was clenched so hard a muscle jumped near his cheek. Mark leaned closer, lowering his voice again, trying new tactic. If you do this, he hissed, you're going to look like a real piece of work. After everything this family's done for you. That one hit, because it always hits, because it's designed to. My family loves the concept of debt. Emotional debt. The kind you can never repay, because they keep inflating the amount. I let out a slow breath and said, tell me what you've done for me. Mark blinked. What? Tell me, I said, because I can list what I've done for myself. Dad snapped, enough. Mum whispered, stop, 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 like if she said it enough times the truth would back away. Mark's face twisted. We raised you, he spat, which wasn't even accurate. Mark didn't raise me. He dropped in at holidays and offered criticism like it was a gift. My parents raised me, I said, and I looked at Mum and Dad when I said it, because I wanted them to feel the difference between raising and owning. And I paid board from the day I started earning. I left home with my own money. I built my career without anyone here recommending me, hiring me, introducing me, paying for me. When I struggled, I handled it. When I needed help, I was told to figure it out. Josh made a small sound, like he wanted to speak, then didn't. Mark's voice rose. So that's it then? You're going to punish the whole family because you've got a chip on your shoulder. I'm not punishing anyone, I said. I'm protecting myself. Dad stepped closer, eyes hard. You're making your mother upset. I felt my chest squeeze because, of course, that was the pressure point. Mom's feelings are the family's favorite weapon. I looked at Mom. Her face was tight, tears threatening. But there was something else there too, fear. Not fear of me. Fear of how this would look. Fear of losing the family script where they're all close and supportive, and I'm a successful kid who never forgets where they came from. I'm sorry you're upset, I said softly, and I meant it. But I'm not signing. Mark scoffed. Fine, he snapped, voice dripping with contempt. Keep your precious money. Just don't come crying to us when you need something. I almost laughed because that was the whole point. I stopped crying to them years ago. Okay, I said. Mark stared at me like he didn't know what to do with okay. Then he turned, loud again for the audience. Well, everyone, he announced with a forced laugh. Looks like some people forget they've got family once they get a bit of cash. A couple of people chuckled awkwardly. Someone looked away. My mom's friend did that wide-eyed, sympathetic thing people do when they think they're watching a family drama episode in real time. I felt heat rise, but I didn't bite. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I just stood there holding the envelope like it was nothing more than paper. Then Josh stepped forward, voice shaky. Dad, he said, stop. Mark turned on him. Oh, now you're defending them. Josh swallowed hard. It's not their job, he said, and his eyes met mine for the first time properly. I don't want them to sign. I didn't ask for this. Mark looked stunned, like he'd been betrayed. Mom's mouth fell open slightly. Dad stared at Josh like he'd just broken the rules of gravity. Josh's hands were clenched into fists at his sides. I'll sort it, he said, voice thick. I'll do a payment plan. I don't know. I'll work more. But don't do this. There was a long moment where nobody spoke. The air felt too thin. And that's when it hit me. This is what power actually is. Not money. Not property. Not being the one with the resources. Power is being able to say no in a room full of people who trained you to say yes. Power is not panicking when they threaten to withdraw love. Power is someone else, finally, saying out loud what you've been carrying alone. It's not your job. Mark recovered first because he always does. He scoffed, muttered something about ungrateful, and walked away toward the barbecue, shoulders stiff. The party noise slowly crept back in like a tide. My mom grabbed my arm as soon as Mark was out of earshot. Her nails dug in. Why would you do that? She hissed. In front of everyone. I gently pulled my arm free. Why would he? I asked. In front of everyone. Mom's eyes flashed. He's stressed. So was I said, my voice wobbled on that, just a little. For years. Dad stepped in, low voice, threatening calm. You're going to tear this family apart. I looked at him and felt something settle in me, solid as a locked door. No, I said, I'm just not holding it together with my signature anymore. After the barbecue, my phone lit up with messages, some angry, some guilt-soaked, some passive-aggressive memes that were clearly meant to sting. Mark texted, hope you feel proud. Mom's crying. My Aunt Rita, a different aunt, equally dramatic, texted, money really does change people. Mom sent, please call me. I don't understand what happened to you. I stared at the screen in my quiet house later, the one I'd bought with my own effort, and I felt the old guilt trying to claw its way in. Then I looked around at the solid walls, the clean countertop, the bills paid on time. And I thought about the rain on my sleeves 8 years ago and the sound of Mark's laughter on the phone. What happened to me? I grew up. I learned. I stopped handing out pieces of my life to people who treated them like spare change. The next day, I drove to Josh's place with 2 coffees and a bag of cheap pastries, because I didn't want my boundary to turn into cruelty. Josh opened the door, looking like he hadn't slept. His place was messy in a normal person way. Laundry basket overflowing, dishes stacked, a half-assembled shelf leaning against the wall. He looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, he blurted before I could speak. I didn't know Dad was going to do that. I figured, I said, and I held out the coffee. I'm not mad at you. He took it with both hands like it was a lifeline. He's furious, Josh said, voice rough. He says you've always been selfish, and he stopped, swallowed. I don't think you are. I sat on his couch and said, you're allowed to not think that. Josh sank into a chair opposite me, elbows on knees. I'm scared, he admitted. I did mess up. I'm trying to fix it, but it's like Dad thinks the solution is always to find someone else to carry it. Because that's worked for him, I said quietly. Until it doesn't. Josh stared at his coffee. I don't want to be like that, he said. Then don't, I said. Start where you are. Make a plan. And if you want help that doesn't involve me risking my life to rescue you, I'll help. He blinked. Like how? Budgeting, I said. Calling your lender. Negotiating. Setting up auto payments. Finding extra shifts. It's not glamorous, but it works. Josh's shoulders slumped with relief, so visible it almost hurt to watch. You do that? He asked. Yes, I said. Because that's help. Not a trap. We spent 2 hours at his kitchen table going through numbers. It was uncomfortable, because money is always uncomfortable when it's attached to shame, but it was real. He admitted things he'd hidden out of panic. I didn't lecture him. I didn't baby him. I just helped him build a path that didn't require someone else's signature. When I left, Josh walked me to the door and said, quietly, thank you for not. I don't know. For not letting them bully you. It made it easier for me to say no, too. I sat in my car afterward and stared at the steering wheel for a long moment, because that felt like victory in a way my family's approval never had. Not because I won against them, because I'd broken a pattern and it had rippled. That week, my mom didn't speak to me for 3 days, which in our family is basically a hunger strike. Then she called, voice small, and said, Do you really think we use you? I wanted to scream yes. I wanted to list every time. I wanted to make her feel it. Instead, I took a breath and said, Sometimes yes. Silence. Then, softly, I thought you'd want to help. I do, I said. But not like that. What if we really need it? She asked. And there was something naked in the question. Fear of the future, fear of falling, fear of not having a safety net. I could have said, then you should have treated me better. I could have gone for the throat. But that wasn't my goal. My goal was to stop bleeding. If you need help, I said, ask me directly, privately, respectfully. Don't ambush me. Don't use other people to pressure me. And accept no as an answer. Mom was quiet. Then she whispered, Your father won't like that. I'm not doing this for Dad, I said. I'm doing it for me. And here's what happened over the next few months. The family didn't fall apart. The world didn't end. Mark remained angry. Mark will probably stay angry forever, because anger is easier than accountability. Dad sulked and made cutting comments. Mom adjusted, slowly, painfully, like someone learning to walk with a different balance. Josh kept making his payments. He picked up a second job. He sent me screenshots sometimes, not to brag, just to prove to himself he was doing it. And me? I slept better. I stopped getting that spike of dread when my phone rang with a family number. I kept building. I kept saving. I kept my life mine. People love to talk about money like it's the source of power, but it's not. The money is just the tool. The power is what you do with it. In my family, money was used like a leash. Whoever needed the most got to dictate the most. Whoever made the biggest scene got the biggest rescue. And for a long time, I played along because I thought being good meant being available. Now I hold all the power and control, and it looks nothing like what Mark thinks it looks like. It's not me strutting in and throwing cash around. It's not me punishing anyone. It's not me winning. It's me standing in a backyard under fairy lights with an envelope in my hands and a room full of people waiting for me to fold and not folding. It's me choosing help that builds instead of help that hooks. It's me realizing that the greatest luxury I've bought with my wealth isn't my house or my savings account. It's the ability to say, calmly and without shaking, no, not like this.